everyone! Welcome to our new episode, which is entitled The First Impression. But before anything else, if you haven't noticed, guys, my name is Chris.
And I am Kath.
And this is The First Impression by Chris and Kath.
Okay, so to start this episode, Chris, I just want to ask you about your thoughts, your first impression of the novel entitled Pride and Prejudice.
So at first, my impression about Pride and Prejudice is that I wasn't expecting that it was a love story, but I was expecting that it will be about the society, people being judged and being neglected by others. But all in all, the story was really good because it tackles social status, marriage, love that is really relevant for today. So how about you? What is your first impression about Pride and Prejudice?
Well, honestly, at first, I thought that it was about the prejudices in the society, and also I thought it was a love story. And yeah, I confirmed that those first impressions of mine were accurate.
Oh, that's good.
So, just a quick trivia to our lovely viewers, Chris. So, the author of the novel is Jane Austen, who was born in Steventon, England in 1775, where she lived there for the first 25 years of her life. Her father is George Austen, who was director of the local parish and taught her largely at home. So Jane Austen began to write while in her teens and completed the original manuscript of The Pride and Prejudice entitled First Impressions between 1796 and 1797. So a publisher rejected the manuscript, and it was not until 1809 that Austen began the revisions that would bring it to its final form, which is The Pride and Prejudice, and was published in January 1813, 2 years after The Sense and Sensibility, which is her first novel. And it achieved a popularity that has endured to this day.
In her work, Austen is often critical of the assumptions and prejudices of the upper class England. She distinguishes between internal and external merit. Though she frequently satirizes snobs, she also pokes fun of the poor breeding and misbehavior of those lower on the social scale. So nevertheless, Austen was in many ways a realist. And the England she depicts is one in which social mobility is limited and class consciousness is strong. So, socially regimented ideas of appropriate behavior for each gender factored into Austen's work as well. While social advancement for young men lay in the military, church, or law, the chief method of self-improvement for women, on the other hand, was the acquisition of wealth. So women could only accomplish this goal through successful marriage, which explains the ubiquity of matrimony as a goal and topic of conversation in Austen's writing.
Wow! I must say that Jane Austen was indeed a great writer of all time.
Yes, that's true, Kath. So let us head on to the common themes that we have observed while we are reading the Pride and Prejudice.
Okay. So Chris, the first theme that I observed in the novel is the family. So the family is the major unit of social life in Pride and Prejudice and forms the emotional center of the novel. Not only does it provide the Bennet daughters with their education and manners, but the social ranking of the family determines how successful they may reasonably expect to be in later life. So, by portraying Jane and Elizabeth as mature, sophisticated adults, and Lydia as a helpless fool, Austen excellently demonstrates how individual character is developed within the family. The conflict between Elizabeth and her mother and her sympathy for Mr. Bennet exemplify the emotional spectrum that runs through the family. So, the influences of Elizabeth's aunt and uncle demonstrates how the family functions as a unit. with the gardeners serving as stand-in parents, offering much needed emotional support at stressful times.
Okay, that's good.
Prior to the theme, which is the family, we also have this pride. So, pride pervades in the characters' attitudes and interaction with one another, clouding their judgments and causing them to make impulsive decisions. Pride covers Elizabeth and Darcy's actual affections for one another. So Darcy's pride in his social status resulted him to look down on those aren't in his personal group. So Elizabeth, on the other hand, is so confident in her ability to assess people that she refuses to change her mind despite blatantly conflicting information. So this is why she initially admires the dishonest Wickham but later despises the good-hearted Darcy. So, while Pride and Prejudice hints that no one is ever totally free of pride, it also makes clear that with the right moral upbringing, anyone can be completely free of it.
That's really true, Kath. So, do you have something to add with that?
Yeah, so I have last, which is the prejudice. So, prejudice is, so in the novel Pride and Prejudice, prejudice clearly refers to the character's tendency to evaluate one another based on the preconception rather than who they really are and what they can do. So, as the title suggests, prejudice and pride often go hand in hand, prompting the characters to make incorrect conclusions about the motives and actions of a person. So Austen's gentle mockery towards Elizabeth and Darcy's prejudice provides the idea that such errors could and do happen to anybody. Just like, for instance, prejudicing others is easy, but recognizing prejudices in yourself is difficult. So, in the story, prejudice is depicted as a step and a way in a person's moral development that may be conquered through reasons and compassion. Austen only blames those who refuse to change.
Okay, that's a good point though.
How about you, Chris? So, what themes do you observe in the novel?
The first theme that I have observed in the novel was marriage. In Pride and Prejudice, it is a love story, but its author is also concerned by highlighting inequality that rules male and female relationships and how it impacts women's marital choices and possibilities. So, Jane Austen depicts a world in which individuals have few options, which are entirely determined by their family's social standing and connections. So being born a woman in that time, having even fewer options for who to marry and how to shape one's life. So Mrs. Bennet's concern for getting her daughters married by a well-to-do man is partly explained by why society regulates and weakens women, and why such marriages must always incorporate practical and financial reasons. The Bennet sisters are all required to work or pursue a character because they belong in the upper class. Women, on the other hand, are not permitted to inherit anything. So as a result, marriage is essentially their only means of achieving wealth and social status. Jane Austen, like Charlotte, is sketching off women who marry simply for security. Elizabeth represents the ideal for her since she refuses to exchange her freedom for financial security. And also, Elizabeth represents the ideal for her since she refuses to exchange her freedom for financial security and instead marries for love.
Oh, you hit such a good point, Chris. So, any other things to say?
Yes, I have one more theme that I want to talk about. This is the social class. Much of the novel's criticism of society in general is focused on social class. Austen averred that a person like Lady Catherine, who is known to be unduly involved in her social status, is clearly guilty of mistreating others. Other characters, such as the sucky Mr. Collins and the conniving Caroline, are shown to be utterly empty. Their beliefs and goals were completely established by the class system. However, in contrast with these two, Austen constantly provides positive examples towards Bingley and the Gardiners. Bingley is an upper-class gentleman who takes his status carelessly and gallantly. The Gardiners are models of how to be prosperous without being arrogant, as they symbolize the honest, generous, and hardworking middle class. Austen's appears to show deep respect to the class structure in different ways, particularly when it serves as a force for her morality and decency rather than a dividing force in society. Darcy is Austen's model for a perfect upper-class gentleman. Though he appears to be arrogant and selfish snob at first, it becomes obvious as the narrative develops that he is capable of transformation. So, he eventually mixes his natural kindness with integrity that he deems a fundamental trait of all upper-class people. Thanks to Elizabeth's influence and criticism, he befriends the Gardiners and becomes an instrument in rescuing Lydia from her predicament. Darcy and Elizabeth's marriage demonstrates that while class distinctions are inflexible, they do not determine one's character.
Wow! So upon hearing the themes of the novel, I can really say that it is indeed still relevant in today's world.
Yes, that's true. Even though the novel was written 100 years ago, the social issues that was tackled by Jane Austen is still relevant up until now.
Talking about the relevance of the novel, so Pride and Prejudice is not just a simple romantic story depicting the different adversities that the lover experience, but it can be considered as a tool for every single person in the world to always look at the people's greatness over the social status. As we are living in this era where everything is facade, we should always choose to know and show respect to its individual rather than give our prejudices, because that's our first impression and that is what he is because of her status in the society. So in addition, despite the fact that the novel is being published years ago, the relevance it contributes to the society remains pivotal. So being looked down, belittled, unaccepted, and neglected to some due to poor status is still one of the prevailing issues in the society today.
Yes, that's right. I agree with that. In addition to what you have said, it could be difficult for some to understand why a novel about some girls whose first aspiration in life is to get married is still so well known nowadays. You know what? We know that the world has changed a lot since then, but I do not think it will ever change so much to make Miss Austen's work obsolete. If you read carefully, we can find her story is still accurate in our modern times. I know that Jane Austen's novels are often classified as romantic stories for women, but I believe that saying that is denying the recurrent social topics that appeared in her novels, topics that sometimes seem to be bigger than the love stories themselves. She does not focus only on the protagonist's love, but gives us a social background, something that not only makes it possible to understand and relate to the characters, but also allows us to find the similarities between the society of that time and to our own society right now.
You got it right, Chris. So yeah, we're done with our discussion.
Before we end this video, I would encourage our viewers to also read the book Pride and Prejudice in order for you to have a grasp on the social issues that were tackled in the novel. So before we end this video, once again, I am Chris.
And I am Kath.
And this is The First Impressions by Chris and Kath.